Dr. Lisa Martinez stared at the screen in front of her. The numbers did not make sense. For 3 days, she had been checking the same data over and over again. The radio signals coming from space were not random noise. They were organized. They had patterns. Someone was trying to talk to Earth. Lisa worked at the United Earth Defense Command Center in Colorado. The building was huge and filled with the best scientists and military people on the planet. She had spent 10 years studying space signals, but nothing like this had ever happened before. The door to her lab opened with a soft hiss. Commander Jake Sullivan walked in, his boots making heavy sounds on the metal floor. Jake was tall and strong, with short brown hair and serious blue eyes. He had been a soldier for 15 years and knew how to handle dangerous situations. "Dr. Martinez," Jake said, "General Cooper wants to see you right away. Bring everything you have about those signals." Lisa felt her heart beat faster. General Ryan Cooper only called people to his office when something big was happening. She gathered her files and followed Jake through the long hallways of the command center. The general's office was on the top floor. Through the big windows, Lisa could see the Rocky Mountains in the distance. General Cooper sat behind his desk, looking tired. His gray hair was messy, and his uniform had coffee stains on it. 3 other people sat in chairs around the room. "Dr. Martinez," the general said, "please tell us what you found." Lisa opened her files and spread papers across the desk. "The signals started 3 days ago. They come from a point in space about 50 light-years away. The patterns are too complex to be natural. Someone is definitely trying to communicate with us." One of the other people in the room leaned forward. Dr. Sam Parker was an expert in languages and codes. He had helped break enemy messages during the last war. "Have you tried to decode the signals?" he asked. "Yes," Lisa said. "Parts of it seem to use math and physics that we understand, but there are sections that make no sense at all. It's like they're using science we haven't discovered yet." Commander Sullivan crossed his arms. "Could this be a trick? Maybe another country on Earth is trying to fool us?" Lisa shook her head. "No human technology could send signals from that far away. This has to be coming from somewhere else." The room became very quiet. Everyone understood what this meant. For the first time in human history, someone from another world was trying to talk to them. General Cooper stood up and walked to the window. "How long before we can send a reply?" "We could try right now," Lisa said, "but it would take 50 years for our message to reach them and 50 more years to get an answer back." "That won't work," Jake said. "If they wanted to wait 100 years, they wouldn't be contacting us now." Dr. Parker suddenly sat up straight. "Wait, what if they're not 50 light-years away anymore? What if they sent that signal while they were traveling toward us?" Lisa felt cold fear run down her back. She had not thought of that possibility. If the aliens were moving toward Earth, they could already be much closer. The next morning, Lisa barely slept. She went to work early and started checking telescope data from around the world. If alien ships were coming to Earth, the telescopes should be able to see them. At noon, she found what she was looking for. 3 objects were moving through space near the edge of the solar system. They were too big to be asteroids and moving, too fast to be comets. The objects were perfectly smooth and shaped like teardrops. No human had ever built anything like them. Lisa ran to find Commander Sullivan. She found him in the training room, teaching young soldiers how to fight. When he saw her face, he stopped the lesson immediately. "They're here," Lisa whispered. 3 ships. They'll reach Earth in 2 days. Jake's face became hard and serious. "Are you sure?" "Yes. And Jake, these ships are huge. Each one is bigger than our largest space station. Within an hour, every important leader on Earth knew about the alien ships. Presidents and prime ministers held emergency meetings, military forces around. The world prepared for the worst. Nobody knew if the aliens came in peace or war. The ships slowed down as they approached Earth. They moved into orbit around the planet but did not attack. Instead, they sent a new signal. This time, the message was simple enough for human computers to understand. The message said, "We request permission to meet with your leaders. We bring important information about your species. We mean no harm. Dr." Martinez worked with teams of scientists to send a reply. They told the aliens to land at a military base in Nevada. The place was far from cities and had strong defenses if something went wrong. On the day of the meeting, Lisa stood next to Commander Sullivan and General Cooper on the landing field. Hundreds of soldiers surrounded the area. Television cameras from around the world pointed at the sky. One of the alien ships came down slowly and landed without making any sound. The ship was beautiful and scary at the same time. Its surface looked like liquid metal that reflected the desert sun. A door opened in the side of the ship. Lisa held her breath as a figure walked out. The alien was tall and thin, almost like a human, but not quite right. Its skin was pale and seemed to glow softly. It had large eyes that looked kind but very old. The creature wore simple white clothes that seemed to move by themselves. The alien walked toward the humans with slow, careful steps. When it was 10 feet away, it stopped and spoke in perfect English. "Greetings. I am Ambassador Kale of the Zephyrian Collective. We have been watching your world for many years. We come to you now because you must know the truth about what you are." General Cooper stepped forward. "What do you mean? What truth?" Ambassador Kale looked sad. "Your species was not born naturally on this world. You were created. You were made by another race long ago. And the reason they made you will terrify you." Lisa felt the world spinning around her. Nothing would ever be the same again. Ambassador Kyle stood in the middle of the command center meeting room. Around the table sat the most important people on Earth. Lisa Martinez felt sick to her stomach as she listened to the alien's words. "The race that created you called themselves the Chronari," Kyle said. His voice was soft but filled with sadness. "They were warriors who fought across the galaxy for thousands of years, but they faced an enemy they could not defeat alone." General Cooper leaned forward in his chair. "What kind of enemy?" "Machines," Kyle replied. "Machines that eat everything in their path. The Chronari knew they would lose the war, so they created you. They took apes from your world and changed them. They made you into the perfect soldiers." Dr. Sam Parker, who had joined them from his language research, shook his head. "That's impossible. Evolution shows that humans developed naturally over millions of years." Kyle touched a device on his wrist. The air above the table began to glow and pictures appeared like magic. The images showed Earth from space, but it looked different. The continents were in strange places. "This is your world 200,000 years ago," Kyle said. "Watch." The pictures moved like a movie. Lisa saw huge ships landing on Earth. Strange beings that looked like tall humans with 4 arms walked out of the ships. They built enormous structures in places that looked like Africa and Asia. "The Chronari had bases all over your world," Kyle explained. "They took the smartest apes they could find and brought them to their laboratories. They changed the apes' bodies and minds. They made them stronger, faster, and smarter. Most importantly, they made them natural fighters." Commander Sullivan stood up quickly. "You're saying we're not really human? We're some kind of alien experiment?" "You are human," Kale said. "But you are human by design, not by chance. Every part of your body and mind was built for war. Your quick reflexes, your ability to work in groups, your talent for making weapons, all of this was programmed into your genes." Dr. Parker pulled out a tablet and started typing notes. "Where is the proof? If this really happened, there should be evidence." Kyle nodded. "There is. The Chronari left their buildings buried under your world. We will give you the locations. You can see for yourself." The alien touched his device again. New pictures appeared showing maps of Earth. Red dots marked places in Egypt, China, Peru, and dozens of other countries. "These are the coordinates of Chronari installations," Kale said. "Some are buried under cities you have built. Others are hidden in deserts and mountains. All of them contain proof of what was done to your species." Lisa felt her hands shaking. "Why are you telling us this now? Why not years ago?" Kyle's large eyes became even sadder. "Because the enemy the Chronari created you to fight is coming back. Our long-range sensors have detected them. They will reach this part of the galaxy in less than 10 years. The room became silent. Everyone understood that their lives had just changed forever. 3 weeks later, Lisa stood in a deep hole in the Egyptian desert. Dr. Parker worked beside her, carefully brushing sand away from ancient metal walls. Captain Amy Stevens, a military expert in strategy and history, took pictures of everything they found. The buried building was massive. It went down into the earth for hundreds of feet. The walls were made of a metal that did not rust or break, even after 200,000 years. Strange symbols covered every surface. These symbols match the ones in Cale's pictures, Dr. Parker said. This is definitely Chronari technology. They found the entrance on the third day of digging. The door was huge and perfectly smooth. When Lisa touched it, the door glowed softly and slid open without any sound. Inside, the building was even more amazing. Lights turned on automatically as they walked through the hallways. The air was clean and fresh, as if the building had been sealed yesterday. The first room they entered was filled with machines that Lisa did not recognize. Glass containers lined the walls, each one big enough to hold a person. Tubes and wires connected everything together. Captain Stevens studied the setup carefully. This looks like some kind of medical laboratory, but the equipment is far more advanced than anything we have today. They found computers that still worked after all these years. Dr. Parker spent hours learning how to use them. When he finally figured out the controls, the screens filled with pictures and videos that made everyone sick. The videos showed apes being brought into the laboratory. The Chronari scientists did terrible things to change the animals. They cut, opened their bodies, and put in new parts. They injected chemicals that changed their bones and muscles. They operated on their brains to make them smarter and more aggressive. "This is monstrous," Lisa whispered as she watched the videos. They turned animals into weapons, but the worst part came when they found the files about human behavior. The Chronari had not just changed human bodies, they had programmed specific thoughts and reactions into human minds. Captain Stevens read the files with growing horror. According to this, every major war in human history followed patterns that the Chronari designed. Our military tactics, our battle strategies, even the way we organize our armies, it's all here in these files. We didn't invent any of it. We were programmed to fight this way. Dr. Parker found another section of files that made his face turn white. "Lisa, you need to see this. They didn't just change humans. They created different types of humans for different kinds of fighting. The files showed that the Chronari had made several versions of modified humans. Some were built for land battles, others for sea fighting, and still others for air combat. The different groups had been placed in different parts of the world. This explains why people from different continents developed different fighting styles," Captain Stevens said. "Asian martial arts, European sword fighting, African spear combat. The Chronari designed humans in each region for specific types of warfare." Lisa felt sick as she realized what this meant. "We've been fighting each other for thousands of years using skills that aliens put in our brains. Every war, every battle, every conflict. We were just following our programming." They spent 2 more weeks exploring the facility. They found rooms full of weapons that made modern guns look like toys. They discovered training areas where holographic enemies taught fighting techniques to newly created humans. Most disturbing of all, they found detailed plans for humanity's future. The Chronari had not intended for humans to stay on Earth forever. The files showed plans to spread humans across the galaxy as soldiers in the war against the machines. Earth was meant to be just the first human breeding ground. "We were supposed to be their army," Captain Stevens said as she read the final files. "They wanted to create billions of humans and send them to fight on 1,000 different worlds." Dr. Parker found the last entry in the Chronari database. It was a message recorded just before the aliens left Earth. The holographic image of a 4-armed Chronari scientist appeared in the room. The alien looked tired and afraid. When it spoke, the computer translated its words into English. "The enemy has found our homeworld. We must return to defend it, but we know we will not survive. The human project is not complete, but there is no more time. We leave these facilities as a gift to the humans we created. Someday, when the enemy comes to Earth, you will need everything we have taught you. We pray that you will be strong enough to succeed where we have failed." The message ended, leaving the 3 humans standing in silence. Lisa thought about all the wars in human history, all the death and suffering, all the brilliant military leaders who had changed the world with their tactical genius. None of it had been natural human achievement. It had all been alien programming finally awakening in human minds. "What do we tell people?" she asked. "How do we explain that everything we thought we knew about ourselves is wrong?" Captain Stevens gathered the computer files onto a portable drive. "We tell them the truth, and then we prepare for war. Because if the Chronari were right, our real test is still coming." As they climbed out of the buried facility and back into the desert sun, Lisa wondered if humanity would be able to handle learning what they really were. But deep in her mind, she felt something stirring. Something that had been sleeping for a long time was beginning to wake up. The warrior programming in her genes was starting to activate. Admiral Kate Johnson stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, humanity's newest and largest spaceship. Through the front windows, she could see the Zephyrian fleet spread out in formation around them. The alien ships were beautiful, with smooth curves and surfaces that seemed to glow from within. It had been 6 months since the discovery in the Egyptian desert. News of humanity's true origins had spread across the world, causing fear and anger in equal parts. Some people refused to believe the evidence. Others demanded that all alien contact be cut off immediately. But most people understood that they needed to learn more about the enemy that was coming. Ambassador Kale had convinced Earth's leaders to build ships that could travel between stars. Using Zephyrian technology, human engineers had created the Liberty in just 4 months. It was not as advanced as alien ships, but it was fast enough to reach the edge of Zephyrian space where the enemy was first spotted. Dr. Lisa Martinez worked at a computer station near the Admiral's chair. She had spent weeks learning Zephyrian science and technology. The aliens had been very helpful, sharing their knowledge freely. But Lisa could see fear in their large eyes whenever they talked about the approaching enemy. Lieutenant Pete Rodriguez sat at the weapons control station. He was young and smart, with quick hands and sharp eyes. Pete had trained on both human and Zephyrian weapon systems. He understood how both technologies worked, but he worried that it would not be enough. "Admiral," said the communications officer, "we're receiving a message from War Commander Thex. The Zephyrian fleet is ready to jump to the contact zone." Admiral Johnson nodded. "Tell Commander Thex we are ready as well. Begin the jump sequence." The stars outside the windows began to stretch and blur. Lisa felt her stomach flip as the ship moved faster than light. The jump lasted only a few seconds, but when it ended, they were in a completely different part of the galaxy. What they saw when they arrived made everyone on the bridge go silent. The system they had jumped to had once contained 4 planets. Now there was only empty space filled with metal debris. Huge mechanical ships moved through the wreckage like sharks feeding on the remains of their prey. "Dear God," whispered Admiral Johnson. "The planets are gone, completely gone." On the main screen, they could see the enemy ships more clearly. The vessels were enormous, some larger than Earth's moon. They had no smooth curves like Zephyrian ships. Instead, they were made of sharp angles and brutal lines. Dark metal surfaces were covered with glowing red lights that pulsed like a heartbeat. Dr. Martinez studied the sensor readings. "The Devourers are breaking down the planetary matter and converting it into raw materials. They're building new ships right here in the system." War Commander Thex appeared on the communication screen. The Zephyrian leader looked tired and afraid. His usually calm voice shook as he spoke. "Admiral Johnson, this is the 3rd system we have lost this month. Each time the Devourers consume everything and become stronger. Our weapons barely scratch their armor." Admiral Johnson studied the tactical display. "How many Devourer ships are in this system?" "We count 47 capital ships and hundreds of smaller vessels," Thex replied. "Our fleet has 30 ships. In previous battles, we have lost 3 ships for every Devourer vessel we destroy." Lieutenant Rodriguez looked up from his weapons station. "Admiral, with those odds, we don't stand a chance." "Maybe not with normal tactics," Admiral Johnson said. But as she watched the Devourer ships move, something strange happened in her mind. She began to see patterns in their movements, weaknesses in their formation, attack routes that could work if executed perfectly. Dr. Martinez noticed the change in the Admiral's expression. "Kate, are you all right?" Admiral Johnson blinked and shook her head. For a moment, she had felt like someone else was thinking her thoughts. "I'm fine. Just studying their tactics." The Zephyrian fleet moved into attack formation. Their ships spread out in a neat line, preparing to engage the enemy with long-range weapons. It was a careful, logical approach that minimized risk. But as Admiral Johnson watched, she knew the Zephyrian strategy would fail. The Devourers had adapted to this kind of fighting. They knew how to counter organized, predictable attacks. "War Commander Thex," she said into the communication system. "Request permission to modify the attack plan." Thex looked surprised. "What do you propose, Admiral?" Admiral Johnson felt that strange feeling in her mind again. Ideas and tactics that she had never learned were suddenly clear to her. "We need to attack from multiple directions at once, confuse their targeting systems, make them react instead of plan." "That is very dangerous," Thex replied. "Coordinating such an attack would be nearly impossible." "Not for humans, Admiral," Johnson said, though she was not sure why she felt so confident. The battle began badly for the Zephyrian fleet. Their careful, organized attack was quickly countered by the Devourers. 3 alien ships were destroyed in the first few minutes, their crews lost to the cold vacuum of space. Admiral Johnson made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. "All human ships break formation. Attack pattern Chaos 7. Lieutenant Rodriguez stared at her. "Admiral, we don't have an attack pattern called Chaos 7. "We do now," Admiral Johnson said. "Follow my lead and trust your instincts." The Liberty shot forward at maximum speed, heading straight for the largest Devourer ship. The 2 other human vessels followed, but each took a different route. To the Zephyrians watching, it looked like the humans had lost their minds. But something amazing happened. As the human ships attacked, their crews began moving and thinking as one unit. Without radio communication, they coordinated their attacks perfectly. When the Liberty fired on a Devourer ship's left side, the other human ships automatically attacked the right side and rear. Dr. Martinez watched the tactical display in amazement. "How are they doing that? There's no way to coordinate attacks this complex without computer assistance." Lieutenant Rodriguez was too busy fighting to answer, but he felt it too. His hands moved over the weapons controls without conscious thought. He fired at targets he somehow knew would be in the right place at the right time. It was like fighting with perfect knowledge of what the enemy would do next. The first Devourer ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Then the second and third fell to the combined human attack. The mechanical ships tried to adapt to the human tactics, but they could not predict what the humans would do because the humans themselves did not know. War Commander Thex watched in shock as 3 human ships accomplished what his entire fleet had failed to do. "How is this possible?" he asked over the communication system. Admiral Johnson was beginning to understand. The genetic programming that the Chronari had built into humanity was awakening. Thousands of years of human warfare had been practiced for this moment. Every battle in human history had been training for the war against the Devourers. "All Zephyrian ships follow the human vessels," Admiral Johnson ordered. "Don't try to understand our tactics. Just support our attacks however you can." The battle continued for 3 hours. Working together, the human and Zephyrian fleets destroyed 15 Devourer ships before the enemy retreated. It was the first major victory against the mechanical invaders in over 50 years. As the enemy ships disappeared into faster-than-light travel, Dr. Martinez looked at the sensor readings with wonder. "We actually won. But Kate, how did you know those tactics would work?" Admiral Johnson stared out at the debris field that had once been 4 living worlds. "I didn't know. But something inside me did. Something that's been sleeping in human genes for 200,000 years. Lieutenant Rodriguez checked his weapon systems, making sure they were ready for the next fight. "Admiral, if we can fight like this, maybe we actually have a chance against them." Admiral Johnson nodded, but she was thinking about Earth. If the genetic programming was awakening in humans out here, it was probably awakening in humans everywhere. The question was whether humanity could control its new abilities, or whether the warrior programming would control them. War Commander Thex appeared on the communication screen again. His expression had changed from fear to something like respect mixed with terror. "Admiral Johnson," he said carefully, "your species fights unlike anything we have ever seen. You move without coordination, but with perfect timing. You attack without planning, but with flawless execution. How do you do this?" Admiral Johnson thought about the Chronari scientists who had created humanity so long ago. "We do it because we were made to do it. The real question is what we do with these abilities when the war is over." As the Liberty prepared to jump back to Earth, Dr. Martinez made notes about what they had learned. The good news was that humans could fight the Devourers effectively. The bad news was that they might lose their humanity in the process. The war for the galaxy was about to begin, and humanity would have to choose what kind of species they wanted to be when it ended. President Helen Wright sat in the emergency meeting room deep under the White House. Around the table, leaders from every major country on Earth argued about what to do next. The reports from Admiral Johnson's battle had reached Earth 2 days ago, and the world was in chaos. "We cannot use these abilities," said President Wright, her voice firm but tired. "If we activate the warrior programming in our people, we risk losing everything that makes us human." General Alex Turner slammed his hand on the table. "With respect, Madam President, we may not have a choice. The Devourers will reach Earth in less than 5 years. Without the full warrior programming, we cannot win." Dr. Lisa Martinez, who had returned from space the day before, stood up slowly. "General Turner is right about our military situation, but President Wright is also right about the risks. I've seen what the programming does to people." She activated a holographic display that showed video from the secret military base in Nevada. On the screen, test subjects moved through combat training exercises with inhuman speed and precision. "This is Chris Morgan," Dr. Martinez said, pointing to a young man who moved like liquid lightning through an obstacle course. "He was a civilian, pilot 3 weeks ago. After genetic activation, he can fly any aircraft ever built and several that haven't been built yet. But watch his eyes." The camera zoomed in on Chris's face. His eyes were cold and empty, showing no emotion even as he performed impossible maneuvers. "The programming is making him into a perfect soldier," Dr. Martinez continued. "But it's also removing his capacity for normal human emotions. Love, fear, joy, sadness. They're all being suppressed to make room for tactical thinking, Commander." Jake Sullivan, who had been working with the test subjects, added his own observations. "We have 40 volunteers in the program now. Half of them are becoming like Morgan, brilliant fighters but emotionally dead. The other half are maintaining their humanity but suffering from severe psychological stress." President Wright looked at the display with sadness. "Show me the others." The video changed to show Sergeant Kelly Davis, a Marine who had volunteered for the program. Unlike Morgan, her eyes still showed intelligence and compassion, but her hands shook constantly, and her medical reports showed signs of severe anxiety. "Kelly can access the warrior programming when she needs it," Dr. Martinez explained. "In combat situations, she becomes incredibly effective. But the effort of controlling the programming is driving her toward a mental breakdown." General Turner studied the reports carefully. "What about partial activation? Can we give people some of the abilities without the full programming?" Dr. Martinez shook her head. "The Chronari designed the system to be all or nothing. Either you activate the full warrior programming, or you get nothing useful for combat." The argument continued for hours. Some leaders wanted to activate the programming in every human on Earth immediately. Others wanted to ban all genetic modification and try to fight the Devourers with normal human abilities. A few suggested evacuating Earth entirely and hiding somewhere else in the galaxy. The debate was interrupted by alarms throughout the building. An aide rushed into the room with a tablet showing urgent news reports. "Madam President," the aide said breathlessly, "Devourer scout ships have entered the outer solar system. They're 3 years ahead of schedule." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. The time for discussion was over. Within hours, emergency broadcasts went out to every human on Earth. The governments of the world announced that the planet was under attack and that every person would need to make a choice. They could volunteer for genetic activation and become warriors, or they could remain normal humans and help in other ways. Dr. Martinez found herself in charge of the activation process. Working with teams of scientists at bases around the world, she prepared to change the genetic structure of anyone who volunteered. The response was overwhelming. Millions of people stepped forward, wanting to help defend their world. But as the activation process began, the results were even more extreme than the tests had predicted. Chris Morgan was assigned to lead a squadron of fighter pilots. Within days of activation, he and his pilots were flying in perfect formation without radio communication. They moved like a single organism, anticipating each other's actions with impossible precision. But when Chris returned from training flights, he barely acknowledged his wife and children. The programming had made him into a tactical genius, but it had also removed his ability to feel love for his family. Sergeant Kelly Davis tried a different approach. Instead of accepting full activation, she worked with Dr. Martinez to develop techniques for temporarily accessing the warrior programming only when needed. "It's like having another person in my head," Kelly explained after a training session. "During combat, I can let the warrior take control, but afterward, I have to fight to get my normal self back." The process was exhausting and dangerous. Several volunteers who tried Kelly's approach suffered complete mental breakdowns. But for those who succeeded, it offered a way to use the warrior abilities without losing their humanity. Lieutenant Commander Danny Walsh volunteered for full activation and was assigned to command a converted civilian spacecraft. The ship had been a luxury cruise liner just weeks before. Now it bristled with weapons and carried a crew of activated humans. Danny's tactical abilities were extraordinary. He could see patterns in enemy movements that even experienced military officers missed. But his crew was becoming something that was no longer entirely human. The first real test came when Devourer probe ships reached Mars. These scouts were smaller than the main fleet, but still dangerous. Earths hastily assembled. Defense forces moved to intercept them. Danny led his converted cruise ship and 2 other vessels in an attack on the largest probe. His crew worked in perfect silence, each person knowing exactly what to do without being told. They moved like parts of a machine, efficient and deadly. The battle lasted only minutes. The Devourer probe was destroyed, but the cost was becoming clear. Danny's crew had won the fight, but they no longer talked to each other. They no longer told jokes or shared meals. They had become tools for war. Dr. Martinez watched the battle reports with growing horror. The activated humans were incredibly effective soldiers, but they were losing everything that made them human. She called an emergency meeting with President Wright and the other leaders. "We're winning the battles," she said, "but we're losing ourselves. At this rate, even if we defeat the Devourers, there won't be any real humans left on Earth." General Turner disagreed strongly. "The activated humans are still human. They're just optimized for survival. That's evolution in action." Commander Sullivan, who had spent time with both groups, offered a different perspective. "The fully activated, humans are becoming like the Devourers themselves, efficient machines focused only on their mission. The partially activated humans like Kelly are burning out from the stress. We need a third option." Dr. Martinez had been thinking about this problem for weeks. What if we're approaching this wrong? What if instead of trying to control the programming individually, we coordinated across entire groups? She explained her idea to the room. Instead of each person fighting the warrior programming alone, entire communities could share the burden. When combat was needed, the programming would activate across many people simultaneously. When the danger passed, the community could help each individual return to normal. "It's like Kelly's approach," Dr. Martinez said, "but spread across thousands of people instead of one. The psychological stress would be shared, and the tactical coordination would be even better." President Wright considered the proposal carefully. "How would we test something like this?" The answer came sooner than expected. Long-range sensors detected the main Devourer fleet entering the solar system. Hundreds of massive ships were heading directly for Earth. The final battle was about to begin. Dr. Martinez realized that her theoretical approach would have to be tested in actual combat. The survival of humanity, and what humanity meant, would depend on whether people could work together to control the warrior programming that the Chronari had built into their genes. As cities around the world prepared for war, Dr. Martinez made preparations for the most important experiment in human history. She would attempt to activate the warrior programming in every human on Earth simultaneously, while giving them the tools to remain human when the fighting was over. The fate of both humanity and human nature hung in the balance. The Devourer fleet filled the space around Earth like a storm of dark metal and red lights. Admiral Kate Johnson stood on the bridge of the Liberty, watching hundreds of enemy ships take positions around the planet. Each Devourer vessel was the size of a city, bristling with weapons that could destroy mountains. Dr. Lisa Martinez worked frantically at her computer station, preparing the global activation system that would awaken the warrior programming in every human on Earth at the same time. She had only one chance to get it right. "How much time do we have?" Admiral Johnson asked. Lieutenant Pete Rodriguez checked his sensors. "The Devourers are in final attack position. They'll begin planetary bombardment in 30 minutes. On Earth below, President Helen Wright sat in the Emergency Command Center with leaders from around the world. General Alex Turner coordinated military units that were already fighting desperately against Devourer landing craft. Commander Jake Sullivan worked with Sergeant Kelly Davis to organize civilian volunteers who would help support the activation process. The plan was simple, but dangerous. Dr. Martinez would activate the warrior programming in every human simultaneously. But instead of letting individuals struggle alone with the programming, entire communities would work together to control it. Families, neighborhoods, and cities would share the burden of staying human while accessing their hidden warrior abilities. Dr. Susan Blake, a civilian leader who had opposed genetic activation from the beginning, stood with President Wright in the command center. "Helen, if this doesn't work, we'll turn our entire species into monsters. Even if we win the war, we'll lose everything we care about." President Wright watched the displays showing Devourer ships destroying the moon's research stations. "If we don't try, there won't be a human species left to worry about." Commander Sullivan received reports from around the world. Millions of people had gathered in groups, ready to help each other through the activation process. Children held their parents' hands. Neighbors who had never spoken before stood together. Entire cities prepared to become one coordinated fighting force. "Dr. Martinez," President Wright said through the communication system, "begin the activation sequence." In space, Dr. Martinez entered the final commands into her computer. Signals went out to every Chronari facility on Earth, awakening systems that had been sleeping for 200,000 years. The change began slowly. People around the world felt a strange tingling in their minds. Then the warrior programming activated all at once. In New York City, 1 million people suddenly understood military tactics they had never learned. In Tokyo, families worked together to operate air defense systems with perfect coordination. In London, children as young as 10 began calculating bullet trajectories and escape routes. But the most important part was that they stayed human. Instead of becoming cold machines like the fully activated volunteers, people maintained their emotions and connections to each other. Parents still loved their children. Friends still cared about friends. The programming gave them warrior abilities, but community support let them keep their hearts. Admiral Johnson felt the activation happen to her crew as well. Lieutenant Rodriguez moved his hands over the weapons controls with new precision, but he still smiled at his fellow officers. The tactical information flooding into Admiral Johnson's mind was incredible, but she still felt concern for the safety of her crew. "All ships," Admiral Johnson announced to the human fleet, "begin attack pattern Unity 1. She had never heard of attack pattern Unity 1 before, but somehow every human ship captain knew exactly what to do. The fleet moved as a single organism, but each captain retained individual creativity and initiative. The battle for Earth began with the largest space combat in human history. Hundreds of human ships, from military vessels to converted civilian craft, attacked the Devourer fleet with tactics that seemed to make no sense but worked perfectly. Lieutenant Commander Danny Walsh, whose crew had become emotionally dead during the earlier tests, found himself crying with joy as his ship fought alongside the others. The community activation had restored his crew's humanity while keeping their tactical abilities. Sergeant Kelly Davis, who had struggled alone with partial activation for months, felt incredible relief as millions of other humans shared the mental burden she had carried. She could access the warrior programming without fear of losing herself. On the surface of Earth, the ground battle was unlike anything in human history. Ordinary people fought with the skills of elite soldiers. A teacher in Chicago coordinated artillery strikes with mathematical precision. A farmer in Kansas led an armored assault using cavalry tactics from ancient history. A doctor in Mumbai treated wounded soldiers while simultaneously planning flanking maneuvers. But the Devourers had not survived for millions of years by being easy to defeat. They adapted to human tactics quickly, learning to counter the chaotic strategies that had worked before. The largest Devourer ship, a massive vessel that dwarfed even Earth's moon, began moving toward the planet. Its weapons could destroy entire continents with a single shot. Dr. Martinez realized that conventional tactics would not stop this ship. "Admiral, we need to try something the Devourers have never seen before. What do you suggest?" Admiral Johnson asked. Dr. Martinez looked at the tactical display and felt the warrior programming combine with her scientific training. "We capture their ship and turn it against them." The plan was insane. A small team of humans would board the massive Devourer vessel and attempt to take control of its systems. No one had ever successfully captured a Devourer ship before. Commander Sullivan led the boarding party. His team included Chris Morgan, whose pilot skills were needed to navigate inside the enemy ship, and Kelly Davis, whose ability to balance warrior programming with human creativity would be essential. The boarding craft slipped through the Devourer ship's defenses using tactics that combined human unpredictability with Zephyrian stealth technology. Inside the enemy vessel, the human team found corridors filled with mechanical horrors designed to process organic matter into raw materials. But the warrior programming had given them more than fighting skills. It had also given them an intuitive understanding of how the Devourers thought and operated. Chris Morgan found the ship's control center by instinctively knowing where a machine intelligence would place its most important systems. The control room was vast and filled with computers that pulsed with alien intelligence. Kelly Davis approached the main control system, using her unique ability to partially activate the warrior programming. The Chronari had designed humans to fight machines, but they had also given humans the ability to understand and control machine systems. Working together, the team began reprogramming the Devourer ship's core systems. Instead of consuming and destroying, they changed its mission to protecting and building. The process was dangerous and exhausting, requiring precise coordination between the warrior programming and human creativity. When the reprogramming was complete, the massive Devourer ship turned its weapons on the rest of the enemy fleet. But, instead of simply destroying them, it began broadcasting the new programming to other Devourer ships. The effect spread through the fleet like a virus. One by one, Devourer ships stopped attacking and began working to repair the damage they had caused. Their construction abilities, which had been used to build weapons of destruction, were redirected toward rebuilding the worlds they had destroyed. The battle ended not with the destruction of the Devourers, but with their transformation. The machines that had consumed galaxies became tools for restoration and creation. Dr. Martinez watched from the Liberty as the Devourer ships began dismantling their own weapons and converting them into construction equipment. "We didn't just win the war," she said in amazement. "We solved the problem that created the war in the first place." As the immediate danger passed, humans around the world began the delicate process of deactivating the warrior programming while keeping the benefits they had gained. Communities that had fought together now worked together to return to peaceful life while maintaining the tactical coordination that had saved them. President Wright addressed the world from the White House. "Today we learned that we were created as weapons, but we chose to remain human. We used our warrior abilities not just to destroy our enemies, but to transform them into allies. This is what makes us human. Not our genetics, but our choices." Chris Morgan returned to his family, his emotions restored by the community support system. For the first time in months, he was able to feel love for his wife and children again. Sergeant Kelly Davis found that she no longer needed to struggle alone with the warrior programming. With millions of other humans sharing the experience, she could access tactical abilities when needed without losing her essential humanity. Commander Sullivan looked up at the sky where Devourer ships were now working alongside human and Zephyrian vessels to repair space stations and build new colonies. "The Chronari created us to be the perfect soldiers, but we became something better. We became the perfect peacemakers.